Gather round, good folk, and lend an ear, for tonight we speak of shadows, of whispers that linger in the stone corridors of history. We speak of a queen, Anne Boleyn, a name that dances on the edge of legend and tragedy. Most know the stark ending, the swing of a blade, a crown lost. But the true horror, that's a story less told, a tapestry woven with threads of psychological torment and a king's cold, calculated fury. Let us, for a time, pull back the velvet curtain of sanitized tales and peer into the grim reality of her final days. It is said, a chilling thought to begin with, that a severed head can retain a flicker of consciousness. For up to 30 seconds, the world might still register. Imagine, if you dare, that final grotesque half-minute. Eyes that might yet blink, perhaps trying to focus on the jeering crowd or the indifferent sky. Lips that might attempt to form a word, a prayer, a curse, a name. A lingering awareness as the vibrant spark of life fades into an eternal twilight. For Anne Boleyn, this horrifying possibility was but one thread in the macabre tapestry of her end. History books will tell you Anne Boleyn, second wife of the formidable King Henry VIII, was beheaded for treason. A neat, almost clinical summary. But this simplicity belies a campaign of psychological torture, so profound, so methodical, it would give even the most hardened modern inquisitor pause. Her execution wasn't merely an act of justice, however perverted. It was a carefully orchestrated political spectacle. It was designed not just to extinguish her life, but to obliterate her very being, her influence, her memory, and indeed to cast a long dark shadow over the legitimacy of her own child, the future Queen Elizabeth. Picture this, May 19th, 1536. Anne Boleyn has already endured 17 agonizing days in the cold, damp confines of the Tower of London. The irony would not have been lost on her, for these were the very same royal apartments where she, just 3 short years prior, had prepared for her magnificent coronation. Can you imagine the echoes, the ghosts of triumph and hope that must have haunted those chambers? Then she was Queen of England, crowned in a blaze of glory at Westminster Abbey, the King's beloved, the woman for whom he had defied Pope and Emperor. Now she was a condemned traitor. Her world shrunk to these stone walls, her future a terrifying, ever-approaching void. And the king, her husband, Henry, he played a cruel game. The execution was delayed, then delayed again. Each sunrise might have brought hope, only to be dashed by the setting sun. This wasn't mere indecision, it was a deliberate extension of her torment. He had even summoned an expert swordsman from Calais in France, a finer, swifter death than the clumsy English axe, some might argue, an act of mercy, or another calculated move in his political theater. A way to ensure the spectacle was both shocking and, in its own grim way, refined, an alien efficiency to further distance Anne from her English roots and supporters. Witnesses from those final days, those who saw Anne in the Tower, described an almost unnatural calm. Cheerful, some even dared to say. She reportedly joked, with a chilling gallows humor, that she would soon be known as Anne sans tête, Anne without a head, and that the executioner would have an easy task with her little neck. Was this true courage, a profound faith, or perhaps, as modern minds might suggest, a form of dissociation, a psychological shield erected against unbearable trauma, a mind detaching itself from the impending horror? For the horror was not just physical, it was a systematic dismantling of her very identity. The charges themselves, adultery with multiple men, including her own brother George Boleyn, incest, conspiracy to murder the king, were so outlandish, so patently fabricated, they would crumble under the scrutiny of any fair court, then or now. But fairness was not the order of the day. This was a campaign of character assassination, designed to convince a nation, and perhaps Henry himself, that this woman, once so desired, was a monster deserving of her fate. Every detail was crafted to paint her as a seductress, a witch, a traitor who had defiled the king and the kingdom. Henry VIII didn't just want Anne dead. He wanted her erased. He wanted her memory, her influence, her very existence expunged from the annals of England. Her contributions to the religious reforms, her patronage of scholars, her sharp intellect, all were to be forgotten, overshadowed by the lurid tales of her supposed depravity. And most crucially, her daughter, Elizabeth, not yet 3 years old, was declared illegitimate, her household dissolved, her status as a princess stripped away. The child who would one day become England's greatest queen was for a time an orphan in all but name, her future deeply uncertain. And let us not forget the 5 men, including Anne's own brother George Boleyn, who had been executed just 2 days before her, their deaths on Tower Hill a public spectacle to preemptively establish the facts of Anne's guilt. Their own final speeches are carefully monitored, lest they contradict the king's narrative. This coordinated judicial murder of 6 individuals, all convicted on evidence we now know to be largely fabricated, stands as one of Tudor England's most brazen acts of state-sanctioned violence. Even the site of her execution is shrouded in a degree of historical ambiguity. While a memorial on Tower Green today marks an approximate spot, contemporary records suggest the actual scaffold may have stood elsewhere within the Tower complex. This geographical confusion is, in a way, emblematic of how Anne's death has been repeatedly reframed and relocated both physically and historically to fit various narratives over the centuries. The sanitized, often romanticized version of her execution, the dignified queen meeting a swift and almost merciful end, bears little resemblance to the brutal reality of the psychological warfare, the public humiliation, and the calculated, cold-blooded efficiency of the state. It would be centuries before historians, piecing together the fragmented evidence that survived Henry's purge, began to reconstruct a more accurate picture of Anne's life and her tragic end. Her death, rather than her life, paradoxically became her most enduring legacy, a testament to a woman who, despite Henry's best efforts, refused to be entirely silenced by history. So, when we speak of Anne Boleyn's execution, let us remember it was not just a single act of violence. It was the culmination of a terrifyingly effective campaign to destroy a woman who had dared to rise too high, to wield too much influence for the comfort of a king and a court. The true horror lies not just in the final, fatal stroke of the sword, but in the meticulous, systematic unmaking of a queen, a wife, a mother, and a human being.
It's a stark reminder of the fragility of truth when confronted by absolute power, a chilling lesson that echoes from the 16th century into our own. Thank you for listening.